Just a few things. We're going to have our show again in Temple City. Shirley's already put in our dates over there, and hopefully they'll okay us because this is not going to be ready in time. And so I figure we better do Plan B and be ready. Michael Roberts, right here. You want to talk about the rendezvous a little bit?
If anybody's thinking about going to the rendezvous, they should start now because it's going way faster than we expected it to. The hotel has sold out of rooms, but yes.
They have one extra room.
Okay. Call them and tell them you want Bob Pressler's room. But there are hotels that are within a mile or two downtown area, and some of them are actually a little less expensive. So, save a couple.
Free breakfast.
Yeah, there's like the Residence, and then Pieces Anderson's is Best Western, and then there's a Motel 6. And
Motel 6.
There are others.
So, yeah.
We had to once.
And so, it's not that inconvenient. They're within 5 minutes. So it's not bad at all. And it's all back roads to get there to them. The workshops are nearly sold out. So if you have any interest at all, I think Lindsay's got one spot open still, and there's Mel's got, I think, 3 or 4 spots open for his. Steve Valentine is doing Bungie Pines. I think he's got 2 or 3 spots left. So if you are able to sign up for an all-access pass for 3 days, you can pre-register for those classes right now. All right? Does anybody have any questions about what's going on? All of the information is on the website. Just go to GSBF and look on the rendezvous and peruse all of it. You'll enjoy all of the stuff that we have going this year. Go for it, Mel. What do you got?
The Tomodachi thing, it doesn't have to be a team effort. It could be singles too.
Okay. So, and we're going to be doing that during the social hour on Friday night. Is that correct?
It's true.
Yeah, and then during the day on Saturday, right? Yeah, so 2 chances to do Tomodachi, and it should be a lot of fun. Mel will have material on site to sell for that if you didn't bring your own, right?
For myself.
Oh,
I have 2 demos.
okay.
And that is in October. We are not having a meeting because the majority of us will be down that way. Okay? Yeah. So you come up here, you'll be by yourself. Okay? And GSBF put a contest out, and I think there was 15 clubs that entered, and 5 of us got selected. We were one of them, and we won $100. And so I have a Zoom meeting, yes. And it was based on membership, getting your membership up. And in the last, since I've taken over, we've really increased our membership in the last 3 years. So this is my 3rd year going on. And so I have a Zoom meeting, I believe it's the 22nd, Monday the 22nd.
So everybody's invited to watch that,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah, surely you'll put it out on the email, and if you want to watch it and see how clumsy I am talking, but you're welcome to. Okay.
Good job, Joe.
Yeah. Good job for all of us. So, okay. We have any new people in here tonight? Kelly, yeah. Tell us who you are.
Hi, my name is Kelly.
I'm part of CBS and Baikoen.
Yeah, Baikoen.
And Mel's my teacher, and I've met several of you guys just at different events. You guys seem like a really nice club.
And Ralph? Okay. Welcome back. I want to thank Ken, especially. Ken lives in San Diego, and he makes the journey up here just for our meetings every Thursday, and I think that's great. Thank you, Ken. And he also sells stands, so if you guys need a stand. I just bought one up from him that Shirley bought, and I just gave her to her tonight. So there is a show coming up in June. I think it's June 10th, in up by Santa Barbara. But I don't think there's anything else happening right now that I know of. Have you heard anything? No? Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, the Ben Oki competition through CBS. Bob?
Up until the end of the month, there's still an opportunity to apply for the Ben Oki Scholarship. It's $1,000 to study bonsai, no strings attached.
Yeah, last year, our recipient was Michael Roberts right here. And
So
he-
I want to tell you, everybody, that's a good contest. I mean, it's a good scholarship. I personally got it for learning a bunch of new grafting techniques, which I've learned and I'm already helping people do. I helped Joe do a ground layer on one of his elms earlier this year, and we did a class at Kimura on ground laying Catlin elms. So I've done some, helped some people do some grafting on pines and junipers. It's a great scholarship, and you can get it for just about anything. And so just write it up and submit it. Bob's made it real clear about how the process goes. Everything to gain and nothing to lose. Go for it.
And I'm bribable.
Okay, any questions, anything? Okay, tonight demonstrator, we have here, Adam Proof is gonna, I'm gonna let him talk and tell him what he's gonna do, because I think this is great. Bob called me up and said, hey, you know, we don't wanna do a juniper, and I said, I really don't. And he said, I got a great idea. Bring a tree, and we'll let Adam tell you about it. Thank you, Adam. So tell us how you got started. And
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Adam. I studied in Japan for 3 years. I have a Shonin certificate from Japan. So, and then I came home and trying to start my own business. So yeah, I've been back for about 6 months now. Did anybody go to the expo?
Yes.
Yeah, everyone should really go to the expo if you haven't, and if you already went, please go again. It was fantastic and a great example of how good American bonsai is becoming. So, and that's what leads us to this tree right here. I was talking to Bob earlier, thinking about what he is considering submitting for the expo to show in 2024. And submission is next January, so we should really be thinking this year about what we want to show next year. And that goes for a lot of things. So we want to be thinking ahead of time what we want to be showing, because the work we do is a little different. We're not going to go as hard. We want the things to be full looking. We don't want to cut too much off. And so we're looking at this tree as a possible submission for next year. And it's the perfect time for cutting back deciduous. Can anyone tell me what we should be looking for in our deciduous trees right now? Something, anything. Yes.
Balance the growth.
Balancing of growth, great. How does this tree look for that?
A little bit top heavy.
Top heavy, okay. What else?
Bottom branches could fill in a little bit.
Okay. So, what do you mean by that exactly? They could fill in a little bit.
So
More branching, more leaves, what?
little bit more twigging on the bottom end and thin out the top and push it back quite a bit.
Okay, what else? What else for deciduous work right now? Isn't this a deciduous club?
Make sure it's actually pushing down long shoots.
I'm sorry?
Make sure it's actually pushing long shoots.
Okay, if we're looking for vigorous
If it's
growth.
not, it may not be healthy enough.
Yeah, great, what else?
Well, you wanna thin it so that those lower branches stay strong.
Okay, cutting for balance, right? Looking at this tree, what do you guys think? What do you guys think about this tree? Kind of what those two people were talking about. Does it look weak? Does it look okay? Does it look healthy? Yeah? Okay. All right, so yeah, if anyone has any questions, please let me know. I'm not a very good public speaker, so please ask me anything if something comes up. Yeah.
So, did you repot this
this winter?
Would I repot it this winter? Well, that depends, right? So, do I want to put it in a show pot, or is this pot that I have acceptable for it? Is the tree too vigorous, or, along the lines of normal repotting? For a show, those are the things that we want to consider, mainly the show pot, right? We can repot right before a show, or we can do it during the normal repotting time. But since the show is in November, we don't want to be repotting in November, right? So we can either repot in the summer before or that spring. So those are things to consider if we want to repot. Should we do that? All right. So because we want to put this in the show, I'm not going to just start coming in here and cutting things off willy-nilly, especially towards the bottom. Now, of course, I'm going to cut some of this stuff off up here that I know I'm not going to use. Does anyone know why I'm cutting in the specific place that I'm cutting? Like, what should I be looking for in my cuts?
Where are you gonna put the apex?
Okay, the apex, right? How far down do I go in this situation?
The directionality of your next growth.
The directionality of the next bud, right? Is it coming up, down, left, right? We want the next bud, the next leaf to grow outwards. We don't want it to grow up and inwards. So I'm going to be looking in here. Okay, so if I see this branch right here, right, I can see that this next one right here is coming out towards this way, which is what I want. So I'm going to cut right there, and I'm going to see, I'm going to take a look once I get a little closer to my shape that I want, and then take another look at it and decide if I want to go maybe one more or even more than that. Yeah.
So if it's growing pretty strong on the top, are you gonna be a little bit more aggressive on the top?
I don't know. Should I? Should I be more aggressive on the top?
I think with early in the season, I would be a little bit more aggressive on the top.
Is this the first trimming of the year or second?
So this looks like it's the first.
Yeah, it has been trimmed this year.
Yeah. Okay, so then, right, yeah, I am gonna be more aggressive on the top right now.
How about 1 or 2 notes?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, what's your name? Lindsay, yeah, so he said 1 or 2 nodes. And what he's referring to is, should I be cutting back to the first or second node of this year's new growth, right? So, for example, if this was this year's new growth, I have 1 and 2. Usually we want to cut back to 1 or 2, depending on which way it's going. But that's only if we have a full silhouette, we should be doing that. So if we see some branches on the inside, or maybe some leaf branches towards that side, I'll put that into consideration, what I want to come back to. So initially what I'm going to do is, just cut to shape of the silhouette, and then come back after and see if I need to take more off or even maybe defoliate some areas. But yeah, usually it's good to just start by cutting to shape, and then you can kind of go from there. What else should we be looking for in deciduous trees right now?
Pest and disease.
Pests and disease, right? Since I'm cutting, what kind of other things should I be looking for? What kind of negative branch or like bad branches should I be looking for right now? Crisscrossing, right? So deciduous, we're going to show when the leaves are off, right? So we can't always tell if branches are crisscrossing at this time of the year, because there's so many leaves on it. It can be a little difficult to see what's going on in there. Usually that kind of work, really like crisscrossing branches, we'll do in the fall time when we defoliate everything. We can get a better view of the entire tree. But if we see something, you know, that we know we don't want, we can just cut it now. If it is visible, yeah.
I know elms have a tendency to grow in a branch every now and then straight up too, so.
Right, straight up and down.
Yeah.
So that looks very, very unnatural, right? But now, if we keep all of the buds going only left to right, it's a very pine-looking branch and pad, right? So if everything, we only cut so that branches only move left to right, eventually they're all gonna kind of branch out this way, right? It's very unnatural looking. Really good deciduous branches and pads are kind of craggly and, you know, move in kind of random directions while going outwards. So that's a really natural look like that.
So to achieve that, what do we do?
Yeah, so to achieve that, we're not just going to cut left and right. We want to keep some buds going up, some coming down. So for example, right, this one right here is coming down. I'm not going to just cut that because I'm just going to leave that. This bud right here is pointing up. I'm going to leave that so that the next one might grow up a little bit, right? So let's say, yeah, I cut right now. This is it. Can everybody see that okay? Yeah. And then the next set of growth will grow from this bud going up, and then I'll cut back to one bud for the next branch, which pushes it back outward, and then it kind of has that natural outlook, right? Does that make sense? Everyone kind of follow what I'm saying? Yeah? Okay.
You have a showing certificate, you can work on bigger trees.
So I have a showing certificate, but am I able to work on bigger trees? So how the certification works in Japan, it only takes 2 years to study with somebody who has a Shonin certificate to get your certificate. For big trees or anything, it takes 5 years. Usually people stay 5-6 years, right, as an apprenticeship. Well, also people are in their mid-20s or younger 20s. You know, I'm 35.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Exactly.
Did you see the sisters were going that way?
Too old. No, normally it's a very grueling process, you know, it's a lot of work. And so it's very arduous. So I only stayed for 3 years, not
Who'd
the
you
5.
study with?
I studied with Taiga Urushibata. He studied with Kimura, and you guys know Ryan Neal. He was Ryan Neal's senpai, his big brother apprentice while they were together. So,
One of the most unusual things about Taiga is that not only is he a master on full-size bonsai, he's also a shonin master.
yeah, not many
Really
people.
unusual.
Yeah,
Usually
not
it's
many.
one or the other.
Yeah, not many people are really proficient at big trees and small trees. In Japan, people try to, you know, stick with, a lot of people, not everybody of course, will only do mostly deciduous or mostly conifers or mostly big trees or mostly shonin. And that's what was one of the reasons why I chose where I chose to study, was because Taiga, my Oyakata, is very proficient at many different styles and sizes and types of trees.
Bob, you didn't fertilize this tree this year, have you?
Yeah, you did?
All right, so what do you guys think about this? How are we feeling about that? I cut all the major long ones off. What do you guys think? Right, so we're cutting for balance right now, right? What else should we? Seems a little too full. What are some ways that tell us that it might be too full?
You can't see through it.
You can't really see through it, right? Yeah, so we really want to make sure that those inside buds can get light so that they don't die off. With elms, it's not that much of an issue. But other trees like hornbeam, it can be difficult to keep those inside branches and buds alive. So defoliating and managing that balance is going to be important. So now we can come back in here, and now that I'm to the shape that I want, I can just come out and defoliate, a little more until I feel that it's going to be enough taken off that it sends out new growth, and that it also balances out the energy for those bottom branches, but it doesn't block out that sun,
Don't you also want to kind of match the look of the openness of the bottom of the tree to the top of the tree a little bit, to make it look more uniform?
So, do I want it to make it look a little more uniform? Well, for elms, the top is stronger than the bottom, right? So ideally, at this stage, I would want the top to be less dense than the bottom. And so I don't want them to look the same. I want it to look more open, less dense up here. Yeah, exactly. So then I can come in here and really.
Explain what you're talking about when you say defoliate, because some people just assume it means take every single leaf off the tree.
Okay, so yeah, defoliating is just a kind of a general term to remove leaves. Foliate, foliage, and to take it off. But there's multiple ways to defoliate. We can defoliate by removing all the leaves, or we can partial defoliate, which is some kind of combination of removing just the outer leaves or the big leaves, depending on what kind of situation that we have. Sometimes with maples and stuff, I'll do a normal cutback and then come back after and cut maybe big leaves, all the big leaves off, or maples will have 2 leaves coming out of one bud, right, one section, and I'll cut one completely off and maybe even cut that one in half. So defoliation is just kind of like a catch-all term for removing leaves.
And what determines how much you remove or how?
Yeah, how do I know how much to take off? Well, I'm gonna look at the tree and, I can tell this tree is really healthy. The leaves are really green. The new branches are extending really far up here. So I know the tree is really vigorous and healthy. So it's something that you have to kind of work with your trees over time to kind of find that sweet spot of what's too much defoliation or not enough. So usually I suggest starting a little easier than going really ham on your tree and defoliating and removing all your leaves at once. And then as the years go on, you can kind of do it a little more and a little more until you find that sweet spot for the tree that the new leaves that come out are smaller and it doesn't send the tree in shock. Sometimes when we defoliate, it'll just send the tree in shock and it'll shoot out way long extensions and it'll use up a lot of energy for the tree. Sometimes maples will do that. If you take off all the leaves on a Japanese maple, it'll kind of like go into shock and the new shoots that it sends out, the internodes will be really long, which is not what we want for maples. And so partial defoliation on maples is gonna be the best way to do it. So it's gonna depend on variety, yeah. But elms, elms are strong and I don't worry about them, so you could really fully defoliate elms if you really wanted to, if it was really, really strong. Yeah, exactly. And so with elms like this, what we would do in Japan we'd literally just shear cut, not really worrying about where the next bud is going or if there's crossing branches. But that's because we had rows and rows of deciduous that we had to cut back at this time of the year. And so it could be really overwhelming to come in here and sit and, really pay attention to one by one and make sure I'm cutting at the right space, the right section, looking. So we don't really do that unless we're preparing a tree for a show, which is something that we might do for this tree. So I'm being a little more, not as aggressive with it, and I'm looking at it, making sure that I'm not cutting off too much, but I'm cutting what I need to off.
In addition to cutting back to the silhouette, are you concerned at all right now about revealing any of the branch structure in the apex?
What do you mean by, am I concerned about revealing?
Well, it's, again, the density thing. It's just a lot of leaves.
It is a lot of leaves, right?
So do you have any interest or concern at this point about showing any more branching structure?
No, so right now what I'm thinking about is how can I get more secondary branching? Like how can I get this tree to send out another flush and hopefully some smaller leaves and some thinner branching. And so if I see any branches that are too long or thick, I'm just gonna cut them. So I guess I'm not really concerned about showing too much right here. This tree is really strong, it's an elm, it's healthy. I could take off every single leaf on the apex and not really feel worried about it at all.
What about negative space between the branches?
Yeah, so that's important, right? We don't want this to just look like a blob, right? Right now, I'm not really concerned about that because it'll be really difficult it'll take a lot of time to focus on that right now, and it might be a little more challenging without being able to see the entire silhouette. And so again, that'll be work I do in the fall when I take off all the leaves, and then I can see what the tree might look like the next year for the show, and then I'll keep that into consideration. Do I need negative space? Do I need more negative space? Is there somewhere that looks too full or unbalanced? Maybe there'll be too many branches on the apex and it'll make the bottom of the tree look really weak because there's so many branches up here, right? So I kind of want it to have a good feeling over the whole entire tree, not just one area.
If you work in defoliate, you would be in the fall, and you do that in the fall or something.
I'm sorry, I can't really hear you.
If you work in a defoliate, you usually do that in the fall or something. Or there's a certain time.
So in the fall, the leaves are falling off, right? They're all turning yellow, going ready for the winter time. And so the leaves are gonna fall off naturally. And so I guess, by the fall, I really mean late fall, early winter, right as all the leaves are taken off the tree for winter preparation.
Another time of year, just for small leaves or anything like you don't do that.
Yeah, so I'm defoliating right now, right? And then I'm gonna see how this tree responds. So I'm gonna do all this work right now. I'm gonna defoliate it, partial defoliate this tree, and then I'm gonna look and see how it responds. Does it respond well? or does it get really, like it doesn't grow a lot at all? If it doesn't really grow, I'm not gonna come in here and defoliate it again, right? But if I do this work and I keep getting, you know, really long and big leaves, yeah, I'll do it again. I'll do it 3 times, I'll do it 4 times. However much the tree is gonna let me, I'll do it that many times. Late summer is when I'm thinking about stopping, right? Because the tree is slowing down. We don't get new leaves in the fall, right? So as the year goes on, it's not going to be as vigorous. The tree just kind of naturally slows down. And then that's when I'm going to kind of slow down. And I can kind of work those proportions accordingly, right? So maybe the first time, right now, I'll go really hard on it. And then depending on how it responds, I might go a little less hard on it, right? So I'll only take off the really long branches or the really big leaves, depending on what it gives me. Does that make sense?
Fertilization at some point.
What's that?
Fertilization, whenever is a good time to stop, so that if you're gonna defoliate, you don't wanna fertilize.
Fertilizing. So honestly, I think a lot of people have, you know, their own way of fertilizing for stuff. Some people don't fertilize deciduous trees at all during the growing season, or very, very little. I like to fertilize deciduous trees right after this time right now. So the tree has used up its stored energy, right? So now I'm gonna start putting on fertilizer so that this defoliation, you know, I'll get a second round, a second flush of growth.
Will the leaves be bigger?
So usually when we defoliate, we get smaller leaves. But too much fertilizer, we could get, you know, we could be back to those big leaves. Small leaves, small twiggy branches is kind of what we want. And so we want those small leaves, so that outside layer of branching is as thin as it can be. Good questions. Anything else?
Do you find that the first part of the growth is small internodes and smaller leaves, and then they start to extend as you let them go, right? So that's why you cut back to 2 or 3 internodes each time.
Speak up a little bit, Mike.
And then as the year goes along,
Yeah.
the twigging and the leaves get smaller, so that last pruning that you do is probably the most important. That's where you want to be really silhouetted.
So what he's saying is the first internodes that the tree sends out are short, and then as the branch starts to continue to grow, the internodes get long and long and long, right? They get a little bit longer. That's why we pinch Japanese maples in the spring when we're trying to build density, right? We don't want long internodes on Japanese maple, so we pinch them, that middle shoot coming out. So a lot of trees will do different things. So Japanese maples will really, those internodes will get really, really long the longer you leave them on. But trident maples, if you know they're just growing very little, the first, second, third, fourth internode could all be usable. Sometimes elms too, they're very consistent. Same with, a few other varieties. So you kind of have to, that's more of a variety specific question. But yeah, we want small internodes. So usually the longer we leave them on, the longer the internodes get. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yep.
Yeah.
Madam, we all have signatures, bonsai artists.
I'm sorry?
We all have signatures.
Signatures.
Yeah. All of us that have a practice art.
Okay.
So you compete this year
Compete?
in that show?
The expo? No, so the expo was in November, and I got back from Japan in October. So I was only back for about a month when the show happened. I had a little vendor's table. I don't have any material for bonsai. I don't have any space to grow bonsai. I don't have money to spend on really nice bonsai right now. Eventually in the future, I really want to have something that I put a lot of work into the expo. Yeah.
Okay.
But right now, nothing.
Did you know the judge that judged these shows?
Uh-huh.
You knew who it was?
Yeah, it was every exhibitor. It was all the exhibitors.
So for the expo, everyone who entered a tree was able to participate in the judging.
I was thinking of a single judge. If you study the judge and see what he's,
Ah,
I would style my tree that.
interesting. That's an interesting approach to winning.
That would have been difficult because all the exhibitors were the judges.
So for me, honestly, I'm less concerned about what the judges think about the material I put in there. I think it's fun to, have that judging, and I think it's important that we all recognize what's important in judging so that we can focus on what kind of material to buy or what to work on to make our bonsai better, right? But as a professional, I'd rather have one of my customers win an award rather than me myself. So I'd probably put more effort into my customer's tree than my own. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Maybe.
Okay, Bob.
Yeah.
Is that what they do in Japan?
Ooh. What do you mean? Is that what they do?
They try to help their customers win?
Well, so in Japan, you're not allowed to enter a show without a professional looking over your entry. And then the professional enters your display on your behalf. So usually people just can't enter a tree. So people who want to enter for a show will go to a professional and tell them, hey, I want to enter this tree with this display into XYZ show. And then they'll kind of get together and make a display together. Or if the customer already has a set display they want, the professional will just take what the customer asked for, and then there's like a judging sequence before the show. It's like it's usually like a few months before, or a month before, or 2 weeks before. Everyone who wants to be entered into the show will take their material for the judging, and then the judging happens, and then they'll take everything back home and wait for the show, and then reset up the whole show, and then the awards will be given then. So it's a little bit different how they do it.
So, and the professional doesn't compete against customers?
So there's a professional only show, but usually, I mean, it really depends, honestly. Yeah. If a professional has a good tree that they want to enter, they can enter at any time. But usually the professional has a customer who has a really nice tree in a display, and the professional is the one that has to submit the tree in display for acceptance. Does that make sense? All right, what do you guys think now? Yeah, go.
That, about that whole thing you just talked about, I thought the professional goes to the customer and asks them if they can work on the tree first.
Sometimes they're good, sometimes.
Oh,
Yeah. But like, yeah, it really depends. But I'm pretty sure most of the big shows, a professional has to be the one that puts a display for entry, basically.
right, but it's not always the customer that asks the professional.
And I'm sure there's situations where a professional says, "Oh, I really like this tree. I've been working on it for 10 years. Let's get it into this show." Yeah, I'm sure that happens.
Do trees live at the professional's place?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. Here in America, we like to do things ourselves, right? Like this is a hobby for us. So there's a lot more people who buy already made material and trees in Japan, and then just enter them in the shows and have the professionals take care of them and just hold them at their house. It's a little different. Yeah.
How much input do these owners give? Like, because it really seems like it's like a patronage system. It's like they own the material, but the professionals are the ones who are kind of responsible, right?
Yeah, they're responsible for the material, but even if it's entered into the show, it's not entered under the professional's name, it's entered in the customer's name. So the customer is the one who gets all the credit, all the recognition, all the everything, but the Japanese Bonsai Association wants the best of the best for their shows, and so they just had it be that way. The professional has to have some input in the display and entry. Also, if anyone is curious about my apprenticeship, I have 2 podcasts that are out. One from Jonas, Bonsai Tonight. I don't know if you guys know him. I did that podcast with him about 3 years ago while I was in Japan. And then also just recently, Jeremiah, a person from Northern California, Central California, I guess, if you look at it that way, had me on for another talk. So if you guys are curious about my apprenticeship or what it's like over there, I suggest checking it out. Yeah. Any other questions?
What do you think of that pot that
Mmm.
and whether or not you think it's appropriate for the show pot?
So, what makes a good show pot? What do you guys think?
It's gotta look old.
It's got to look old. Why is that important?
Well, makes it look, it's an old tree, yeah, the trees look old, you know?
Yeah, we want them to kind of match, right? We want an old tree with an old pot. What makes a pot look old?
Patina.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'll take this. Thank you, appreciate it. So is this a good pot? It's not a bad pot. I don't think it's a bad pot. You're saying Jim Gremmel made this pot. Is it Jim Gremmel pot? Yeah, an American potter. That's fun, right? It's not old though.
Sorry.
40 years old.
It's older than you are.
It's older than I am. But it's all about relativity, perspective. The tree's about 35, 40 years old, right? So that matches, but the tree looks much older than that, right? Look at that great bark on there. The tree looks really old. It's really good. It's a good tree. It's good work.
I think Jim made that pot in '78.
How do you know that?
Is that bought from? No, I think on the bottom of the pot gives a date.
It's hard telling the lighting.
It is hard to tell,
But
huh?
the pot doesn't seem to have enough contrast with the tree.
I think you kind of, we're talking about style there, but I think you have a really good point. There's not enough contrast in the color for the tree. So this is not a bad color. It's a crackle, like cream color, which looks pretty good.
So don't you think that there's no leaves on
Yeah, so of course, yeah, so there's not gonna be any leaves on it. So this bark is like a grayish white kind of looking color. I think it might be a little bland looking. So if we wanted some color, we could throw in, you know, any color that we wanted.
Bob,
I think the style is good. You know, it's a nice style for the tree.
What about the depth and stuff?
Yeah, the depth, everything looks really good. The size looks good. You know, it's not too big, it's not too small. It kind of fits the tree really well. You could go a little thinner if you really wanted to make it fancy, but I think this is totally an acceptable size. So this is a good option for a show pot. I don't see anything. What's that? Is it mounted too high? Well, I hope everyone during the break, if we have a break, everyone to come look at the pot and you know, think about that, because pot selection is really important when we're trying to put a tree into a show, right? So it's important to think about at this time ahead of time, so that if we want to change the pot, we can start searching for maybe a better option, or if we need to repot it. So it's all going to be kind of incorporated into it. So yeah, I hope everyone can get a little looky-loo.
What about the width of the trunk versus the length of the branches being out?
So that, you know, we're kind of getting into proportions, right? Is the pot too wide or is it too skinny? I think it's an appropriate size for this tree. The tree is really healthy right now, so that's telling me that it's not too small. And by the looks, it's not telling me that it's too big, right? The pot isn't out this way.
I think he was talking about the trunk size and the branch size.
Yeah.
Like the trunk may be a little bit small for the width of the branches.
No, I think it's just a style that it is. It looks fine. You know, not every bonsai has to be proportionally exactly what we want it to look like, right? So,
Well, this is really an elegant look.
yeah, it's a really nice, elegant tree, you know, lots of branches, really full looking. The bark really adds to it. Can we have branches that are wider or shorter, or do we want it, you know, shorter? Those are just design choices. I think it looks good how it is, so, yeah.
What about position of the tree? It's in the center of the pot.
So, why don't we want it in the center? So why is that an issue?
Older bonsai masters usually want it off center.
Yeah, so why did they do it that way? Do you know? Okay, so in old style, usually for like a straight up trunk, they didn't want it in the middle. They would look at, you know, the first branch and then kind of put it off to the other side to make it a little unbalanced. But that's an old way of looking at it. So if this was, you know, a few decades ago, this trunk would be really far off to one side as a really dramatic kind of look, right? But when the tree is like that, it's not very a healthy option for the tree. So right now, the roots are really balanced. Now we don't want it directly pinned in the center. Maybe off to one side a little bit, just a little bit would be, you know, totally acceptable. But having it in the middle is totally fine, no problem. It's a very old style, having it off to one side, really dramatic like. If you like that, you can totally do that. It's just a style choice that was popular, you know, a few decades ago and has kind of grown out of that.
Bob, I was asking the color of the tree or the design of the tree in November leaves, color?
Depends. This year, in the new place, they're bright yellow and orange.
During November?
Yeah. Previous years, they basically turn brown. Yeah, I mean, here, typically our dominant fall color is brown. But there's a lot more contrast between the pot and the trunk, when there's no leaves on it.
So are you gonna show it defoliated, or are you gonna show it with?
Depends. Like, last one, like Catlin Elm, 2 weeks before the show, the colors were amazing. And I was like really happy because I was gonna show it in leaf. And then it rained like a week before the show, and enough leaves came off that I had to take them all off. So it depends. If the color's good and the leaves are in good shape, yeah, I'll leave them on. If not, then like before I drive up north, I'll be plucking them off.
So Adam, with that knowledge, if he has gold leaves, would you change it to like a blue pot to contrast that?
That's something that we need to think about, right? So
You have good fall coloring here for these. Of course, the yellow that Bob said is pretty common, but you also get rusty reds.
Yeah, no, this year it turned orange and stuff.
yeah, so blue pot would be good. A green pot would also be good, or a
Contrast
red
color.
pot. Yeah, something with a lot of contrast.
You need to come look at the front side.
But that's only if your leaves stay on and they have color.
Yeah, so then ideally we want to find a nice color that fits both circumstances, trying to find something that looks good with yellow leaves and looks good without leaves. Since we're not positive what the color is gonna be of the leaves. Are we gonna fully defoliate, show a nice winter silhouette, or changing of the colors of the fall?
Yeah, and it's just gonna depend on the conditions.
Yeah.
Full color on actually have to be 3 weeks anyway, so.
Exactly. It's
shows.
kind of luck at that point.
Have you noticed fertilizer late in the fall changes the time of fall color?
Ooh, I don't know. I can't tell you that. I don't know that. So he asked, does fertilizing affect the color in the fall? I don't know. That's gonna have to be something that Bob plays with over many years. When or if fertilizer, and what fertilizer and how much fertilizer is going to adjust the color or no color. I don't have the answer to that one, sorry, I don't know. Yeah.
What would you do on elms, Lindsay?
What?
What would you do on elms to adjust the color? Think early.
I feel I've noticed that if you fertilize heavily,
It stays green.
going into the fall,
Stays
it doesn't
green.
color up as nice, it stays green.
Stays green.
So it stays green.
Yeah, it stays heavy green. Doesn't drop off.
But now how do you fertilize to make that yellow color? I don't know that.
I don't know
I
specifically.
think it's more the temperature.
That's what I think.
They-
But that's what it was saying, is does fertilizer have some kind of impact on that though, right? So maybe if you use a lot of fertilizer, the tree needs more cold to turn colors at a certain time. That's kind of like really. Question? No? Yeah?
I guess your opinion and what they do in Japan,
Mhm.
if you're not gonna show a tree anytime soon, like, do you or do they put it in a bonsai pot?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Do we put trees in bonsai pot if we're not gonna show them? So it depends on what stage of development it's in. If we're trying to grow it really fast, we might use a box or some kind of really big pot or put it in the ground. Bonsai pots are small usually, and so that starts to slow the tree down. And we do that when we want to increase density and ramification, really slow the tree down so the internodes get tighter and tighter and tighter. And pot size and repotting and fertilizing, those are all things that we can do to adjust how quick or slow a tree kind of grows. So it really depends on, you know, what are we trying to achieve. If we're trying to slow a tree down, smaller, smaller, smaller pot.
Like Shogi will make you wanna slow it down so it doesn't get.
Yeah, that's right. But, you know, if we're making shohin, we need to grow a shohin. We're not always going to grow it in a shohin pot. It's the same thing no matter what the size is. It's all relative to what we're trying to achieve. So if we're growing shohin, you know, we can grow shohin in the ground for 20 years and then start cutting back and then putting it in a smaller and smaller pot. Or we can put it in something much bigger, or really grow it, you know, low and slow. It really depends. There's a lot of different ways and techniques that you can go about it depending on the variety or what we're trying to achieve. Does that make sense?
Yeah, how do you
Yeah.
keep it short? How do you keep it short of that?
Well, it depends on what variety it is. If the tree is already small,
That's the fat one.
we're just using a wide array of techniques like this to kind of slow the growth down. Repotting is really important for shohin because that really slows the tree down. And so small trees, repotting is going to be much more important as the development continues. And the later and the older the tree gets and the more refined it is, the slower we want the tree to grow. And so usually we'll kind of adjust repotting for that.
And how would you adjust it? Repot more often or less often?
Yeah, so less often, hopefully. Because it really depends on how you repot. So if it's a deciduous tree, you can repot really hard, more often, but you have to take a lot of roots off at that time for it to really slow the tree down. But a tree can also slow down if
Being in the same pot for too long.
yeah, being in a pot for too long, exactly. And so it really depends on the size of the pot and the tree, how fast is it drying out, how much fertilizer are we getting in it. Yeah.
So, do you recommend repotting trees on a schedule? Or how do you determine when it's time to repot?
Repotting trees on a schedule. So it really depends, again, what am I trying to achieve? So if we have a tree in a bonsai pot like this, I'm not gonna have a schedule. I don't want a schedule. I don't want to repot because it's been 2 years or 3 years. Oh, it's time to repot. I think generally people repot too much, and repotting really slows a tree down. And so it can be detrimental to the tree and the health and what we're trying to achieve. So, you know, there's a lot of factors which will want me to repot. Is water flowing through the pot? Is the health of the pot or the health of the tree an issue? Is the roots too wet? Is there not enough airflow? I definitely don't repot on a schedule though. Yeah. All right, what do you guys think? Too much? Not enough?
Look at it from the front.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that the work you've done in the matrix makes the rest of the tree look makes the rest of the tree look better. It just
Right.
looks like it's much more in proportion.
So I'm gonna go more than this, honestly, because it's really healthy and vigorous. And the tree, I saw a lot more extending growth up here as opposed to down here. And so I'm gonna take much more off the top. I'm just kind of slowly working as I'm talking. But yeah, it looks much more balanced right now, right?
Right.
It kind of looks very similar density-wise. So, like I said earlier, I don't want this to be equal in density right now. I want the top to be thinner than the bottom. And so if I'm looking at it, I stand back and I look at it and it looks really balanced, not enough. Taking more off. Also, as I'm working on the apex, thin, small branches are important. So if I see these really thick branches, I'm just gonna get rid of them.
On the apex, how are you gonna style that?
I'm gonna worry about the exact styling in the fall time.
Okay, so what are you looking towards? Are they like?
Right now, what am
Yeah.
I looking at? I'm looking for density.
Okay.
Can I see any big leaves in here?
So would you do the top one like a room style, mushroom style?
Yeah, that's something I'm gonna have to choose, or Bob is gonna choose in the fall. What do we want it to look like exactly? Right now, I'm just kind of rough
Yeah.
shaping it.
Or you want it a little more thick?
Yeah, kind of just rough shaping it. But if we go too much, then it might affect what it's gonna be, later on in the season. So right now I'm just worrying about density, really. Just kind of cutting a little bit to shape to kind of make it look nice. But shaping is gonna be much more important and much easier to do in the fall time.
Okay, we're gonna take a break right now. See Lily and her assistant Greg for raffle tickets. That's not gonna be in the raffle, okay? This will be in the raffle, okay? And then we have everything over there, okay? So get your snacks, come on up and look at the tree and see what Adam's doing.
Yeah, it's a great tree.
It is clean.
Okay, can you take your seats, please? So we can get started?
It's on?
Oh, it's a lot better.
Yeah.
Now we got some big ideas.
All right, you guys ready? So, yeah, they wanted to do a raffle, a giveaway raffle here. And so Bob brought this elm right here. There was a lot of elms that he had me choose from, but I chose this one, and I chose it for a reason. This tree right here has a lot of good straight sections. As it is right now, it's not really a fun or exciting tree. It's kind of like the baby version of this, but not nearly as good. So I was thinking this would be fun to make a lot of small trees out of. Since this has some good sections of the trunk that are nice and straight and are a good size for shohin, I thought it'd be nice for somebody to have some shohin material, since I really like shohin and I want a lot more, yeah, and a lot more good shohin in America. And so an easy way to do that is to air layer from an already existing tree the section of trunk that we want, and then we just grow the branching from there. And so air layering is the perfect way for something like this. We can get, 6 really good trees out of this one piece of material. Depending on if you want to do branches, you can do cuttings from these. Elm cuttings take really quick and easy. And then the trunk, we can just break up into sections and do multiple at one time even. So you don't only need to do one air layer at a time. If there's branching in between the sections that you air layer, you can do multiple air layers on the same trunk. So for instance, I can air layer this very bottom out, and so I could put an air layer right here, and then I could put an air layer right here, and then another one right up here, and then another one right up here. So you could get about 4 or 5 out of this at one time. Or you could do it one at a time, whichever. So, yeah, I thought I'd just get an air layer on there for you guys, and then whoever wins it will have hopefully a good start to some good show-me material in the future.
Adam?
Yeah.
The technique for making multiple air layers of the trunk is different than if you were just making one air layer? Or is it
No,
just the same technique?
Yeah, the technique is the same. We just want to make sure that we have some foliage, some kind of branching in between, because that's what's going to give us the new roots, you know? Yeah.
So you could cut branches off to create empty spaces still too, correct?
Yeah, definitely. And we could make cuttings out of this, you know? So, no problem.
What kind of elm is it?
This one? I don't know. Bob, what kind of elm is this?
Chinese elm?
There we go.
What's the difference, or how can you tell the difference?
That one have a smaller, darker leaf. I think it's Chinese elm.
Yeah. So I wanted to show something that I haven't seen a lot of people do, and that's to use tin foil to hold the sphagnum moss in. It's a lot easier to hold and to make a little ball with this tin foil. Kind of cup it like this, and it holds its shape really nice. It's a lot easier to get the sphagnum moss to stay in there as we're kind of working it into a ball. And also, it's really easy to poke holes in this if I need to add water. It's a lot easier to manage watering that way. So I don't see a lot of people use this, but I've done this and it works pretty well. So I thought I'd show you guys.
That was the preferred method from the Monrovia Nursery Company for air layering.
What's that?
That was the preferred method from the Monrovia Nursery Company for air layering.
See, there you go, from a nursery.
So they're the biggest nursery in the country, and that's how they get it down here.
There you go. Does anyone have any questions about air layers?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
So, what's a good time of year to do air layers?
So right now is the perfect time to do air layers.
When does it get too late?
What's that?
When does it get too late?
When does it get too late? Well, we don't want to do, we want new roots to be growing, right? So we're trying to achieve new roots from a given location. And so we want to make sure that the tree is growing, actively growing. So anytime during the active growing season is acceptable. But right now here in this, late spring, mid-spring, late spring is going to be a really good time to do that. We have new leaves, and so we know that those leaves are, taking in energy, and that's what's creating those roots. So right now is a good time. But if you do it later in the year, you might just have to wait until the next year to take off the air layer or the sphagnum moss, depending on how many roots you have, how vigorous it is. So yeah, how long should I wait before looking? So I like to look maybe 2-3 weeks to see what it's doing. You know, is it callousing over, or do I have an issue somewhere? Do I see the new calloused roots starting to take form? You know, I'll take a peek in 3 weeks. So we really want to make sure that we cut all the way to the xylem heartwood. We want to make sure we get rid of that cambium. Make a nice sharp cut on the top. You can even use a piece of wire so that the tree kind of girdles itself. That's a good way that people like to do.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so if you guys are going to the rendezvous, I will be there. I will be giving a talk about styling trees. So I hope that you guys can make it if you're gonna make it. If you're gonna go, you come stop by and say hi, take a look, see what we got going on.
Registration doesn't open for those until August first.
Yeah, the day one's okay. So educational seminars, which is what Adam's gonna be doing, are open to anyone who has, an all-access pass or a day pass, okay? They're free.
Not for vendors.
Oh, you laughed at me.
Yeah, you laughed at me.
Okay, there we go. Can you guys see that?
Might wanna show everybody in. You wanna have everybody come up and take a look?
Yeah, has anyone not done this? Everyone's done it. You haven't done it? You want to come up here and take a look? Yeah, come here. It's hard to see here. Put a light on it. So, I went all the way.
Like how far do you have to go so it doesn't reconnect?
Yeah, so you see how far I
Do you
went
have a
all the way
piece of-
down to that heartwood. You see that?
Yeah.
You see how it's like almost a little slimy looking or wet looking? You know, you want to go into that wood right there, that hardwood. This is not enough. You see that? That little section right there. So we want to make sure that all that comes off. Scrape it off. And also we want to make sure that this top line is nice and sharp. Nice, clean, sharp line.
Why is that important?
So that nice, clean, sharp line helps promote new root growth.
Keeps it from callousing over?
Yeah.
So I see people do it like a zigzag. Do you go straight around instead?
Oh, that's a good question. So the zigzag. So the thought behind that is if you make a zigzag, the roots will kind of grow in that zigzaggy pattern. That's more for tropicals. I'll see people like split the entire piece once it's rooted and shove some bamboo in there to kind of pry it apart. So it looks like it's building Nabari. I think those look really artificial looking because they're so perfect. You know what I mean? They're like evenly spaced out and
Like too professional.
too repetitive. Exactly. So I really like that natural look that natural Nabari gives. Same with branching, you know, it's kind of up and down, left to right, craggly and muscly looking. So yeah, I think that's more of a technique used for tropical trees.
If it roots well, if you get a lot of roots, they'll have to be at different levels anyway. So,
Yeah,
just all at one place.
yeah. All right, now really easy with the tin foil.
You don't put a split in that tin foil and come around? No?
What?
You don't put a split in that tin foil and come around and wrap it up?
No. So he's saying like make a cut in here and then come around. You could if you want to, but tinfoil is so malleable and it holds its, you know, I'm just, you know, crinkle it all together and it kind of gets tight. I'm not worried about that exactly. If you want to be really neat and clean about it, you could do it that way, just like you do with plastic, right?
Right.
You have to make that cut in there.
They're talking about what they're using.
Yeah, so this is sphagnum moss. It's orchid moss.
Yeah, no rooting hormone, huh?
I don't use rooting hormone. You can definitely use rooting hormone. You can use the powder or the liquid or the gel. I hear a lot of people having good luck with the gel recently. Clone X, I hear a lot of people like that. You know, I've had it root with no rooting hormone, and it works fine.
Yeah. Maybe a month now. I eat root species, you know, it's just extra work bringing stuff on.
Yeah, and the powder, it comes off really easily. You know, you kind of dust it on, and then the first time it gets water, it kind of flows away. So I heard some people like to mix it in with the sphagnum moss, which is, you know, something I haven't tried, so I can't really say how effective that is. But it sounds like it would work well, so, you know, try that.
Is there any additional danger about heating with the aluminum foil, conducting too much heat?
Yeah, so does the tin foil absorb heat?
Right.
So when I have some food in the convection oven,
Okay.
it's really easy for me to hold the tin foil and to pull all the food out. If that was a metal tin and I did that, I'd burn the heck out of my hands, right? But I can hold the tin foil. If it can be in an oven and I can touch it, I think it should be okay in this, you know.
All right.
And everyone's stagnant.
It's not very scientific, but that's my thought behind it.
So,
Yeah, exactly. There's the sphagnum moss that's wet in there. It keeps it cool as well. So,
If you're really concerned about that, you put it in shade or just make sure there's some kind of shade on it.
exactly.
Adam,
Yeah.
what size do you consider shogi?
What do I consider shohin? 10 centimeters to 20 centimeters. Up to 8 inches.
Starting where?
From the top of the pot to the top of the tree.
Top of the pot or the soil?
Soil to the top of the pot. Top of the pot. Even if the pot is mounded up a little bit, top of the pot. Where's that lip? To the top of the tree. If there's a gin, if there's a long big gin, usually you even count the gin. Sometimes, you know, you can get away with having a gin that's a little longer. But usually, you know, you should count the gin, but I don't think it needs to be that strict. If it isn't too big and unruly, I think it's okay. So the top of the pot to the top of the tree.
how do they count cascade?
Yeah, so cascades, good questions. Cascades or semi-cascades, they go to the top of the tree to the bottom branch. So sometimes that can be a lot more, right?
Does that mean the wingswept is 15 inches long and 5 inches high is still showing?
So, yeah. So, good question.
I'm just trying to like, does that make sense? I don't know.
So usually when we're working with shohin for a display, we don't have just one, shohin tree. We'll have it in some kind of box, maybe a 3-point or a 5-point or a 7-point or a 6 or whatever you want to do with it. And so, does it match everything else? You know what I mean? We can have shohin forests. So I imagine that a shohin windswept would be acceptable, even if it's a little bit long.
I asked Tommy here on the Sumi a question along those lines, and what he said was when they're judging them, as long as it feels like it's a show. Like in that situation, or cascades are way longer than the issues.
Yeah,
But he says as long as it still feels like a show, or a forest.
yeah. So there's definitely shohin forests. I've seen those, so no problem. I imagine windswept is kind of the same thing. Just make sure it's in that, fits the rest of the display.
But it's 8 inches.
All right, there we go. That's your raffle tree. Some shohin material. Does anyone have any questions?
So you wouldn't trim back at all, the top or anything?
Oh yeah, good question. So if I'm doing an air layer, I want this vigorous growth, because then the stronger the tree is, the more leaves that it has, the more new roots are more likely to grow. So I really want this to, be pushing, exactly. Yeah, so I'm not gonna cut back like this. This is for, again, what am I trying to achieve? And focusing in on what you're doing. Show tree, I want slow growth, cut back, light on the inside. Making a air layer, I want fast growth, I want lots of growth. I'm gonna put lots of fertilizer, same with grafting or anything like that. Go, 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 go.
So, at about 4 weeks, if you come back and check that,
Yeah.
and lo and behold, there's no sign of roots.
Yeah, so in
What do you
that
do?
case, I'll recut that top cut
Okay,
just to get a new fresh cut in there.
okay.
Okay, and then also I'll check all the way around, make sure that it isn't sealing that itself. And sometimes it'll have this weird kind of callousy stuff on it. I'll make a cut right into that.
It almost looks like cauliflower.
Yeah, it almost looks like cauliflower.
Like cauliflower.
Yeah, those are the new roots kind of starting to kind of heal but grow. It's about to start growing at that point. I'll make a new cut right under it, like halfway into it.
So what about aftercare? Do you put it in sort of a semi-shady place and keep it?
Yeah, so aftercare, I want this to really grow. So I'm gonna put this in full sun, just make sure it doesn't dry out. And if it's ready, like I get a lot of roots all the way around, it's ready to be cut off. I'll cut it off and I'll put it directly into good bonsai soil. We got nice roots in here, and nice brand new roots in here. I'll be really careful and delicate, and I'll take off as much sphagnum moss as I can. I'll get it out. If there's a little bit, it's okay, but it can be a real pain in the butt if you leave it in there. So it's best to get it as much out as you can if you have new roots. That's the best time to do it. Yeah.
That is the slow, tedious part of this process.
Taking off the sphagnum moss.
The roots are very, very fragile.
Very fragile, and there's a lot of them, and they're so intertwined and mixed up. It can be a real chore. Yeah. Any other questions?
You propose the aluminum to get the water in?
Yeah, so because I crinkled the aluminum, there's little spaces at the top. It's not completely sealed. I didn't use a wire and, tighten shut. So when I go to water this tree, I'm just gonna water all over the air layer, and it'll kind of trickle in a little bit at a time, and it'll keep it moist. And the same with the bottom, right? So there's gonna be little holes down here, and so if there's too much water, it's gonna kind of pour out. So that's another reason why I like the aluminum foil, because if you get a nice tight seal with a plastic bag, you can overwater it. And if it's soaking in water, it's not really good. So,
Occasionally, it's good for if it takes a long time, root needs to be replaced after 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
But that's easy.
yeah.
It's 5 minutes a piece.
Can you plant it with the sphagnum moss around it, just drop it in the pot?
So when I take it off,
Yeah, you cut the tree off.
So when I cut the tree off, I really want to get all that sphagnum moss out. And then I'll put it directly into good bonsai soil. I don't want to cut it off in the fall. So if I see only a little bit of roots, like let's see I see roots all the way around, but it's August and it's not completely full of roots, I'll even wait until next spring. And then as this tree is starting to push new foliage next year, I'll cut it off then and put it in good bonsai soil. And then, sometimes I'll tie it down with some sticks or some chopsticks or some, pieces of twine or something, or some aluminum wire just to kind of hold it steady so that the new roots can get established.
When I used to do that, if there's any excess wood down below, I would leave that on and it helps stabilize the pot.
You could do that. Yeah, you could definitely do that.
I'm sorry? If there was any excess wood down below, I would leave that on and it helped stabilize, and then when I went to repotting it over here, just like cut off that. And it really made it easier to keep it from flopping around the pot.
That's one way. Honestly, for me, I like to do the opposite. I like to get as much off as I can initially, just because I hate dealing with it later on. It can be, it can grow in on itself and under itself. Like I just want to get it nice and clean right then and there. And then I'll just be extra careful watering and setting it in the pot. I might not even tie it down. I might just set it in a sturdy pot with new soil and just know that be careful, don't move it. When I'm watering it, just
Both methods works.
yeah.
I have lots of them. When I was in the field growing, and there's birds back there and all kinds of stuff. I just found it
Just do what's best for you, right? There's multiple ways to do the same thing. Same with air layering. There's a lot of ways to do the same thing. Try something. If it doesn't work, change it up for the next time. There's a lot of good ways to do stuff. Anything else?
What do you fertilize with?
What do I fertilize with? I would ask people in your club what's good for their area and what trees you're working on. I don't want to just give a blanket statement, you know what I mean? I just use organic, natural, something where the numbers are close together. 555, 545, 222, 111. Just a generic, organic, something nice and easy, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
call it at the very end.
Okay, here we go.
Just hide it under the pot.
This one
Come
is
back around.
sticking to my finger.
Thank you.
Okay, great, great. You want to do this separate? Do what?
Well, we don't want to.
Oh, pull a special though?
Contentious.
Well, Lindsay's saying we'll pull a winning ticket for the Juniper.
Run, Kelly, run, 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 Gus.
What sphagnum did you use?
White sphagnum moss. White. Orchid moss. New Zealand white orchid moss.
Yeah, that stuff is expensive now.
You know, it's 10 $10 for a little block.
Yeah,
It used
that-
to be $6.
No, it used to be $20 for like the big bale.
Well, that I never got that good of a deal.
That was like 4 years ago. It was like, you know,
Really?
$20 for a big block. I'm like,
Then
now
yeah,
it's like, you can't get it.
everything is expensive. Everything is expensive right now.
It's true.
Stupid expensive.
Wiggly line.
Yeah!